There's no way a seat was reserved for you. The only people I invited were Dad and Mom. Got it. Did you really think you could just barge in and attend?
My brother Ryan's loud laughter echoed through the venue. That day, I had gone to my brother Ryan's wedding venue. However, my name wasn't on the guest list at the reception. As the receptionist tilted their head in confusion, my brother Ryan, dressed in his wedding attire, walked toward me with a smug grin on his face. And that's when he hit me with the words, "There's no seat for you." The guests around us glanced over with confused looks. I see. So in their eyes, I must have been the clueless idiot who showed up uninvited. Ryan had always called me names like useless and a failure, tormenting me for as long as I could remember. Ryan hadn't changed, even with age. He had gone as far as calling me to his wedding just to see the look on my face when he hurt me. But too bad for him. He was the one mistaken. I hadn't come to his wedding venue because I intended to attend. I went to the reception desk just to check if my name was on the guest list, just in case. Looking straight at Ryan, I opened my mouth to tell him the truth. "You're wrong. I didn't come here to attend your wedding. I was invited by that person. My name is Karen, and I'm 26 years old. I didn't grow up in what anyone would call a fortunate household, but I was probably the only one in the family who felt that way. My father, mother, and my older brother Ryan, who is 4 years older than me, must have lived happily together. To put it bluntly, their happiness was built at my expense. Or perhaps it would be more accurate to say that I was their personal punching bag. Since childhood, they had always been especially harsh toward me alone.
I hate it when people find out we're siblings. Do me a favor and just pretend we don't know each other, okay?
I don't even want to think about you being my child. How did I end up with such a worthless failure?
Being insulted like this wasn't just something my brother did. It was something my parents did too. It was an everyday occurrence. Why was I treated so horribly by my own family? According to my parents, the reason was simple. Unlike my brother, I was a useless nobody with no talent and a dull personality. It was true that Ryan had always excelled in both academics and sports. Ever since he was little, he scored at least 95 points on every test. In high school, where rankings were posted, he almost always placed in the top 10. His athletic ability was impressive, too. He was a regular on his team and carried his uniform and gear with him, walking confidently toward competition venues. I had seen that sight more times than I could count. With his talents and achievements, Ryan was always popular and constantly surrounded by people. Meanwhile, my grades were nothing special, just average. I wasn't athletic either. Whenever I ran a short distance race, I'd either finish last or barely above last place. I was also painfully shy, introverted to a fault, and had trouble making friends. At best, I could count the number of people I considered friends on my fingers. My social life was what you'd call narrow but deep. But to my parents, that just made me unfriendly.
You can't study or play sports like your brother, so at least try to be more cheerful.
Wipe that gloomy look off your face. That's why people don't want to be around you.
I had been scolded like this more times than I could count. If it had ended there, I might have believed they were just lecturing me out of concern for my future. But then they would continue, saying things like, "Well, no matter how hard you try, someone like you will never be liked. Seriously, how can siblings be this different?" Their words made it painfully obvious they weren't trying to help me. They just enjoyed looking down on me. Joining in with my parents, Ryan would throw in his own insults, casually calling me such a gloomy freak. With each remark, the weight on my shoulders grew heavier, and I became afraid to lift my head in front of others, especially my family. The shadow cast by my bangs only made my face look even darker, which led to me being called unfriendly even more often. And so the vicious cycle continued. I had no real place in my own home, but thankfully, the few friends I had were genuinely kind people. Each of them gave me words that warmed my heart, like, "I'm always on your side, Karen." Bit by bit, their support helped me find the strength to look forward. By the middle of my junior year of high school, the time had come when everyone around me started thinking about their future. That was when my best friend and I made a decision. We decided to leave our hometown and go to college in New York. Ryan, who had graduated from high school a little before me, had enrolled in a prestigious private university close enough to commute from home. My parents never hesitated to spend money on Ryan. They paid his entire tuition in full without requiring him to take out any student loans, and even told him, "You don't need to get a part-time job." Meanwhile, when I had just entered high school, they made their stance crystal clear.
Once you graduate, we're not giving you a single cent for college. If you want to go, figure it out yourself. If you can't, then get a job. Not that I can imagine any company wanting to hire someone like you.
It was hard to believe those words were spoken to their own daughter. Anyone who heard this without context would probably tilt their head in confusion, wondering what kind of relationship we had. Even I sometimes found myself questioning, am I really their child? When my parents made that declaration, my patience finally snapped. That was the moment I decided I would leave home no matter what. Even if I had to take out student loans, I would go to a university far away from my hometown. I will pass. I will escape that suffocating place, no matter what. Fueled by that determination, I threw myself into my studies. In the end, I succeeded. I was accepted into my dream university. Starting college and living on my own didn't mean I had reached my goal. If anything, this was just the beginning. The first thing I needed was money. To support myself, I started working part-time while balancing my studies, filling my days with constant business. In the mornings, I worked at a cafe before heading to college. After lectures, I went straight to my second job in a restaurant kitchen. To maximize my sleep, I squeezed in my studies during free periods. Whenever I ate lunch alone, I would multitask, staring at my laptop while eating something quick and easy with one hand, usually just a piece of bread.
Don't push yourself too hard. If you collapse, none of this will matter.
My best friend from high school told me this more than once. But for me, the feeling of liberation, being away from my family, far outweighed the exhaustion. That sense of freedom fueled me, keeping me going, and strangely, I never felt like I was struggling. "Thanks for worrying about me, but I'm totally fine," I answered cheerfully, only to end up taking on even more shifts at work. Of course, my best friend scolded me for it again. At the time, I felt genuinely grateful, thinking, they really care about me that much. But looking back now, I can't help but feel a bit exasperated at myself. Maybe I shouldn't have worried people so much. Most of my days were spent going back and forth between work, college, and my apartment, rarely ever setting foot in my parents' house. But when it came to holidays like Christmas or Thanksgiving, avoiding them wasn't so easy. Despite how terribly they had treated me, they still had the nerve to send messages like, "You should come home once in a while." Had they finally realized how cruel they had been and reflected on their actions? I had to admit, I was naive to even think that way.
I just got a job at a major IT company. There's no way a failure like you could ever manage that.
The moment I stepped through the front door, my brother bombarded me with his bragging.
Ryan, you're amazing.
That's our son.
And as expected, my parents showered him with praise. Even as I pressed my lips together in silence, my brother kept smirking, his arrogant grin never fading as he continued talking.
My boss and colleagues trust me, and they've started giving me important tasks. Someone like you, though, even if you become a working adult, you'll probably only be allowed to do menial chores.
No, actually, Karen should be grateful to do the chores. That's all she's good for anyway.
At that moment, I understood. I hadn't been called back home so they could apologize for how they had treated me. That was never their intention. They just wanted to compare me to Ryan, who was living his so-called brilliant life, and use me as a punching bag once again. What an absolutely vile display of human nature. Without realizing it, my body tensed up and I clenched my fists so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. I could feel a deep furrow forming between my brows. Were these people really full-grown adults? Why were they still acting so childishly, even now? Countless question marks flooded my mind, but I knew there was no point in voicing them to my parents or Ryan. Nothing would change. All I could do was keep my mouth shut and exhale slowly. I should avoid going back home as much as possible, even if they contact me again. With that decision, I gradually became estranged from my family. Work, studying, and the occasional break with my best friend. By keeping my schedule as packed as possible, I found myself thinking about my parents and Ryan less and less. Or rather, it would be more accurate to say that I simply didn't have the time to think about them anymore. Thanks to that, I was able to maintain my peace of mind. I never failed any courses, and in the end, I successfully graduated from college. I didn't return to my hometown for work. Instead, I got a job at a company in New York. The thought of going back home never even crossed my mind. Even if I didn't live with my parents, I knew all too well that they would go out of their way to find me, barge into my life, and hurl insults at me endlessly. I had no interest in willingly throwing myself back into hell. Back in college, my daily routine revolved around campus, my part-time jobs, and home. After entering the workforce, that routine shifted to just work and home. Years have passed since then, bringing me to where I am now. My parents and Ryan had drilled it into my head countless times, calling me useless, incapable, and insisting that even if I got a job, I'd only ever be stuck doing menial tasks. But contrary to their words, I had achieved significant results in my career. Of course, there have been plenty of challenges, but overall, I'm living a fulfilling and successful life. And then, out of nowhere, it happened. As I finished work and sat down for dinner, my smartphone vibrated on the table, signaling an incoming call. If it were my best friend, they would have sent a message first asking, "Can I call you now? So, was it work related?" Tilting my head in curiosity, I glanced at the screen and immediately frowned. There was no mirror in front of me, but I was certain my face must have looked like I had just swallowed something unbearably bitter, my tongue going numb from the taste. I really don't want to answer this. The words slipped out unconsciously. The caller was none other than Ryan. I scrolled through my call history, and his name was buried so far down that I had to swipe multiple times just to find the last time we had spoken. It had been that long since we'd had any real contact. What could he possibly want now? The phone kept vibrating insistently, as if demanding me to pick up, fueling my anxiety. But my body felt as heavy as lead, and I couldn't even bring myself to lift a finger to tap the screen. Before I could do anything, the call ended. But barely a moment later, the phone started vibrating again. If I didn't answer now, it would only make things more troublesome later. I could already picture the kinds of things Ryan would say. Why didn't you pick up right away? Do you really think someone like you has the right to waste my time? There's no way around this. I'll just answer. I let out a deep sigh as I slowly reached for my phone and pressed the answer button. Hello?
Oh, finally. Took you long enough. Seriously, when I call, you should pick up right away. Not that I actually want to contact you, but I've got something to report. So I'm doing you a favor by calling.
Even though I had answered on the second call, this was the attitude I got. I felt the urge to sigh again, but I knew that would only make things more troublesome. Swallowing my frustration, I held back and simply asked, "What's the report?" Ryan let out a smug chuckle, his voice filled with excitement as he spoke.
Guess what? I'm getting married, and we're having a lavish wedding overseas.
Next, he told me the date and venue of the wedding. It was an extravagant location, one I had seen featured on TV before. A high-profile venue, no doubt. No matter how terribly he had treated me in the past, I wasn't the kind of person who would refuse to offer a single word of congratulations upon hearing someone was getting married. So, I see. Congratulations. I couldn't exactly be thrilled for him, but if I sounded too indifferent, he'd probably start whining with something like, "Do you really mean that?" Anticipating that, I softened my tone as I spoke. Maybe that pleased him, because without me even asking, Ryan started rambling about his partner.
Unlike you, she's really cute, and her smile is amazing. And the best part, she gets along great with Dad and Mom. Honestly, way more than you ever did. She already feels like real family.
The constant comparisons between me and his partner. There was no way I was imagining how deliberately emphasized they were. Even in a moment like this, did he really still feel the need to put me down? As I sighed in exasperation, Ryan suddenly asked, "So, are you coming to the wedding?" I let out a small, wry chuckle before responding with a question of my own about travel expenses. I expected him to snap back with something like, "Just answer the question." But instead, he casually said, I'm really busy with all the preparations right now. Sorry, but just book your own flight and cover the costs yourself." And with that, he ended the call with a quick, "later." Hearing Ryan say the words "sorry," but was almost shocking. He did start the conversation by throwing insults at me as usual. But could it be that marriage had made him develop at least a tiny shred of human decency? I wish I could go back and grab my past self by the shoulders, shake her hard, and shout, "How could you even think that?" Ryan's mindset had been set in stone for years. There was no way a mere wedding could change him so easily. The day of Ryan's wedding arrived, and I went to the reception desk, only to find that my name wasn't on the guest list. As the receptionist tilted their head in confusion, Ryan, already dressed in his wedding attire, approached me with a smirk, the corners of his mouth curling upward. I said nothing, simply locking eyes with him, staring straight ahead. And yet, he still had the audacity to say this.
Oh, come on. There's no way a seat was reserved for you. The only people I invited were Dad and Mom. Got it. Besides, I never even sent you an invitation. Did you really think you could just show up and attend?
Ryan's loud laughter echoed through the venue. Guests around us cast confused glances in my direction. I see. So in their eyes, I must be nothing more than the clueless fool who showed up uninvited. The question Ryan asked over the phone, "Are you coming to the wedding?" was never about preparing a seat for me. He had called me to this so-called joyous occasion for one reason only, to see the look on my face when he hurt me. But too bad for him. I hadn't come to Ryan's wedding to attend. I went to the reception desk simply to check, just in case, whether my name was on the guest list. No, you're wrong. I didn't come here to attend this wedding. I was invited by that person.
This wedding. And who the hell is that person?
Ryan tilted his head in confusion, clearly not understanding. With a calm expression, I pointed behind him and said, "The wedding I'm attending is over there." Ryan furrowed his brows but still turned in the direction I pointed. His eyes widened in surprise as he took in the sight before him.
What? Someone else is getting married today besides us.
His voice was filled with disbelief. What he saw was the largest hall in the entire venue, a space far grander than the one his wedding was being held in. That was where the wedding I was attending was taking place. Ryan had probably expected to mock me and make me feel miserable, but he was completely off the mark. However, he clearly didn't want to admit it. Hold on, don't make up stupid lies. You're just saying that out of desperation, right? Trying to save face so you don't embarrass yourself? He rattled off excuse after excuse, clinging to the idea that I was bluffing. Ryan still didn't realize it. The one who was about to be embarrassed wasn't me. It was him. Just as I shook my head and said, "I'm not lying," a voice called out to me, "Karen." Both Ryan and I turned in that direction. From the entrance of the hall I had pointed to earlier, my best friend came hurrying toward me, her footsteps light and quick. That's right. The wedding being held here was my best friend's. Even if Ryan had actually invited me to his wedding, I had never intended to attend. The person who had tormented me for years, and the person who had always listened to me, supported me, and even made the decision to move to New York with me. There was no question about who I would prioritize. She must have heard the entire exchange between Ryan and me, because the moment she stood beside me, she shot him a sharp glare, as if to say, "See? She told you it wasn't a lie."
You're absolutely pathetic. What's so fun about acting this childish? On what's supposed to be one of the happiest days of your life, you're wasting your time plotting petty harassment. Doesn't that just make you feel empty inside?
My best friend's voice was clear and resolute. It wasn't particularly loud, yet it rang through the space with unmistakable sharpness, drawing the attention of the surrounding guests. Seeing her stand up for me so fiercely, even in this situation, sent a warm surge through my chest. Thank you for always being on my side. I silently expressed my gratitude to her in my heart. But Ryan stood there with his eyes and mouth wide open, looking as if his soul had left his body. It was clear that my best friend's words hadn't reached him at all. It seemed to have gone in one ear and out the other. Though he seemed to be looking in her direction, his gaze was actually fixed on someone standing a little farther away. His body trembled slightly, despite the absence of any cold, and his lips had gone completely pale. His face was a mix of shock and fear. Who was standing there? With each sharp click of approaching footsteps, Ryan's complexion grew paler and paler.
Why?
The words slipped weakly from his lips. His sentence trailed off, but it was obvious what he meant to say. Why are you here? The person seemed to pick up on Ryan's unspoken words. Stepping beside my best friend, he looked directly at Ryan and spoke.
How could a wedding proceed without the groom? Am her partner. Of course, I should be here at the venue.
That's right. The person who had arrived with my best friend was none other than her fiancé. But why was Ryan reacting so intensely to this man's presence? Because he was none other than the sales director of Ryan's business client.
I never imagined you and Karen were siblings. It's quite a small world, isn't it? My wife's best friend and my business associates turn out to be family.
His tone was calm and polite, but even that seemed to send a wave of fear through Ryan. His trembling grew visibly worse. If this were an anime, there would probably be visible after images of Ryan shaking. His teeth had begun to chatter, producing a faint but continuous clicking sound. As for the main matter at hand, the sales director began, and at those words, Ryan flinched so dramatically it was almost comical. His voice, which had been calm just moments ago, had now dropped, low, firm, and commanding.
I had heard about it before, but after witnessing what just happened, I can now say with certainty, you and your parents have been mistreating your own sister, Karen, for years.
Wait, no, that's not.
Ryan stammered, his eyes darting around frantically as if searching for an escape, his words barely coherent. He probably wanted to make excuses, but knowing that his own words had been overheard, he must have realized there was no way out. And just as if to deal the final blow, the sales director spoke in a calm, matter-of-fact tone.
We will need to reconsider our contract with your company.
What?
Ryan's voice was so loud and shrill from shock that it nearly cracked, but beneath it, I too let out a small, surprised, "What?" as I tilted my head in confusion. The company name the sales director had just mentioned wasn't the one Ryan or my parents had told me before. I later found out the truth. Ryan had been lying about working at a major IT firm. In reality, he was employed by one of its subcontractors. Having been spoiled and placed on a pedestal by our parents his whole life, Ryan had grown into a prideful, image-conscious person. Maybe that's why he had casually thrown around the name of a prestigious company. Once he received praise, "That's amazing," as expected of you, he probably found himself trapped, unable to backtrack. So he kept up the lie, hiding the truth all the way up to this day. The pride Ryan had spent years carefully building crumbled in an instant with the sales director's words. He bit his lower lip in frustration, unable to hide his humiliation. The sales director calmly began explaining that this decision wasn't based on just this incident alone. He went on to say that Ryan often made decisions based purely on his own judgment, rarely conducting proper market research. As a result, the company's profit margins had been steadily declining year after year, putting him in a position where losing the contract was only a matter of time. And now, with this incident, the final nail had been hammered in.
A person who can't even value their own family, the people closest to them, could never truly consider the needs of their business partners. I have no interest in working with someone who can so easily hurl insults without a second thought. We will be terminating our contract.
Hit by the sharp words of the sales director, Ryan staggered, his legs giving out beneath him as he collapsed to his knees, completely disregarding the fact that he was still in his wedding attire. For a moment, I thought he had finally realized his mistakes and was about to show some remorse. But then,
No, you've got it all wrong. Karen's name not being on the guest list was just a mistake. She was actually invited.
unbelievable. Ryan had resorted to pathetic excuses. But there was no way any of us were going to believe him. "I'm beyond disappointed in you." I don't even want to consider you my brother anymore. Stay out of my life forever. I declared my final goodbye to Ryan and, without waiting for his reaction, took my best friend's hand and walked away without looking back. Inside the venue, the air was warm and filled with joy, every detail thoughtfully arranged. My breath caught as I saw my best friend in her wedding dress. She was so beautiful, I nearly teared up. Beside her, the sales director gazed at her with eyes full of love and tenderness. There was no doubt about it. They were perfect for each other. And I was certain they would share a lifetime of happiness together. I had pushed all thoughts of Ryan out of my mind and fully enjoyed the wedding. Even after returning home, I let myself bask in the lingering joy of that beautiful day. Then, exactly 1 week after returning from the trip, my phone vibrated in my hand, flashing Ryan's name on the screen, announcing an incoming call. For some reason, the vibration felt louder than usual, almost as if it reflected the instability of the person on the other end of the call. My body stiffened instantly. Just when my best friend's wedding had started to soften the painful memories, he has to come and ruin it. I felt my cheek twitch in frustration. Completely unaware of my thoughts, I answered the call with a simple, "Hello?" The next moment, Ryan's furious voice exploded through the phone, shouting at me with overwhelming rage.
Are you kidding me? You ruined my life.
What? Back when he called me before the wedding, I had carefully chosen my words to avoid provoking him. But now that I had cut ties with him, it didn't matter to me in the slightest how furious he was. When I responded with an exasperated tone, Ryan raised his voice even louder and began ranting about everything that had happened in the short time since the wedding. Apparently, he had also lied to his partner, telling her that he worked for a major IT company. Encouraged by compliments like, "That's amazing," and "so cool," Ryan had let the praise go to his head. Determined not to let the truth come out, he had been constantly putting on an act around his partner, carefully maintaining the illusion of success in his daily life. On dates, he feared hearing, "A high-income earner like you can't even afford this?" So, to keep up the act, he frequently took her to expensive restaurants and covered the entire bill himself. To avoid suspicion based on his appearance, he made sure to wear only high-end brand clothing whenever he was with her. He had been depleting his savings, but with such an unsustainable lifestyle, his funds had started running out. Keeping up this act would only make things harder for him. Someday, he would have to come clean. That thought lingered in the back of his mind, but his overwhelming pride wouldn't let him admit it. And so, despite continuing to hide the truth, he went through with the marriage. But then, a new problem came crashing down on him. That problem was the wedding. His wife had always expressed her desire for a destination wedding, frequently mentioning how she wanted to have the ceremony abroad. She even sent Ryan photos of her ideal venues, making it clear through her messages that a domestic wedding was never an option in her mind. Instead of admitting the truth about his depleted savings, Ryan chose to take out loans just to cover the costs and push forward with the wedding. Was it because his love for his wife was that strong? Or was it simply his obsession with maintaining appearances? Well, it was probably a bit of both. But on the day of the wedding, something completely unexpected happened. That unexpected event was none other than the wedding of my best friend and the sales director, taking place at a different venue on the very same day. Ryan had mocked me, only to have that very moment witnessed by the sales director of a major business client, leading to the contract being terminated. Then, word of the incident quickly spread among the company executives attending his wedding. As a result, he was held accountable and was promptly fired. It was the perfect example of the phrase, when it rains, it pours. Everything had spiraled into a complete disaster for him. But Ryan's misfortunes didn't end there. They say, birds of a feather flock together, and Ryan's wife was just as obsessed with appearances as he was. She had invited a large number of friends to the wedding, which meant the costs for travel and accommodations had skyrocketed. She wasn't contributing to the expenses at all. Ryan was covering everything. She didn't have much money herself and had completely relied on her high-earning, big company employee husband for financial support. What would happen when she learned the truth and witnessed Ryan being fired right in front of her? With all his lies exposed, Ryan was dealt the final blow. "I can't be with you anymore." His wife declared their divorce on the spot. She was probably only ever attracted to Ryan's fake status and supposed wealth. Though, there's also a chance that she truly did love him at some point. But the overwhelming shock of all his lies shattered any feelings she had left. Either way, it was over.
Why the hell is this happening to me? I lost my money, I got dumped. This makes no sense. This is all your fault.
Ryan's furious shouting rattled my eardrums. Even after listening to everything he said, I still couldn't understand how he had come to the conclusion that this was my fault. Everything that had happened was simply the result of his own actions. He had brought this upon himself. If he had swallowed his pride and been honest about where he worked, he might never have needed to take on debt. If he hadn't treated me so cruelly in the first place, he wouldn't have lost his contracts, been fired as a consequence, or ended up getting divorced. Ryan had completely lost control, relentlessly screaming, "This is all your fault," over and over again. His refusal to take responsibility was beyond absurd. It was downright pathetic. This was beyond unreasonable. I opened my mouth, intending to calmly refute him. But before I could get a word in, he cut me off.
I'm gonna make you take responsibility for this. I'm coming to your place right now, so you better stay put.
What? Why on earth should I have to clean up his mess? And how did he even come to the conclusion that barging into my home was the solution? Confused, I let out a baffled sound, but Ryan seemed to misinterpret it as fear. Finding amusement in the idea that I was scared, he let out a low chuckle before speaking again.
You can try to run, but it's useless. I'm already right outside your place.
You've got to be kidding me, I muttered, furrowing my brows, and quietly made my way to the front door, careful not to make a sound. The moment I peeked through the door's peephole, a loud bang, bang, bang echoed through the phone. I didn't even need to see it. I could picture him pounding his fists against the door. But the room I was in remained completely silent. There were no dull thuds echoing through the walls, no vibrations shaking the door or the floor beneath me. "Hey, are you by any chance at the apartment I lived in back when I was in college?" At my question, Ryan suddenly went silent, as if he had frozen in shock. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, he was the first to break the silence.
Wait, so you're not living here anymore?
As if the rage that had been fueling him suddenly drained away, Ryan's furious shouting came to an abrupt halt. His voice shrank to a barely audible murmur, muttering in disbelief, "That can't be." Then where? It sounded less like he was speaking to me and more like he was talking to himself, dazed and lost. His anger had clouded his judgment so much that he hadn't even considered the obvious, that I might have moved after becoming a working adult. He had stormed over to the apartment, determined to make me pay, only to discover that I no longer lived there. Completely caught off guard, his confidence deflated in an instant. and his tone grew noticeably weaker. I could easily picture him, like a puppet with its strings cut, slumping forward in utter defeat. If I kept the call going, Ryan would undoubtedly ask, "Then where are you now?" Before that could happen, I moved to press the end call button. But just as my finger touched the screen, a loud, angry voice, not Ryan's, blared through the phone.
Hey, stop banging on my damn door. Don't you get that you're disturbing the whole neighborhood?
It seemed the new tenant of my old apartment had finally lost patience and come outside. "You're being way too damn loud," the tenant complained, completely justified in his frustration. Ryan seemed to have completely lost the will to form a coherent response. He just kept mumbling meaningless fragments. Well, I mean, over and over again. Now's my chance to end this. Without hesitation, I pressed the red end call button and, in one seamless motion, blocked Ryan's number. Later, I heard that he had been taken to the police station, thoroughly interrogated, and eventually released. Whether it was because he had genuinely reflected after being lectured by multiple people, or simply out of fear of getting in trouble with the police again, I didn't know. But one thing was certain, Ryan never tried to come after me again. And so, Ryan's new life began, one burdened with massive debt. But instead of letting him face the consequences of his own actions, my parents, completely oblivious to the concept of accountability, reached out to me with a request. "Please help your brother." Coddling him now wouldn't do him any good. It would only make things worse. Letting out a deep sigh, I flatly rejected their request without a second thought. I've already cut ties with Ryan, so I have no obligation to help him. And as for you two, I never want to have anything to do with you again. And so, I was finally freed from the chains of my family, able to live my life on my own terms. If I ever have a family of my own in the future, I will use my brother and parents as examples of what not to be and create a home filled with warmth and love.